I would like to start by a quick raise of hands to see who has got any kids in here. That's quite a lot. So I've got two. And like Bess said, I tell them bedtime stories about science. They're not really educational stories. It's more the stories behind scientific research. Stories about the people who didn't answer because when they were asked why. Somewhere around 1850, 1860, a large cable called the transatlantic telegraph cable was rolled out on the ocean floor, spanning all the way from Europe to the United States. This was the only possible solution at that time to send Morse code messages from one continent to the other. But there was a problem. In 1850, rubber was not yet as widely known and used as it is today. So the cable was designed with materials that weren't really fit for the environment in which they were being used. So that's why the cables started breaking down, not long after they were installed. So in order to maintain and sometimes repair these cables, giant ships had to travel from one continent to the other and back again, and hoist the cable from the ocean floor and pull it on deck for closer inspection. Now, up until that time, it was believed that 500 meters was probably the greatest depth that any creature could live. So it isn't hard to imagine that people were shocked that when they pulled these cables up for closer inspection, from depths somewhere around 1.8 kilometers below the sea surface, they found them covered in marine life. Weird sea creatures would get tangled up in these cables, creatures we'd never seen before. And that made us wonder, what else lives down there that we don't know of? And together with that wonderment, there were also renewed funds. Funds for adventurers that were willing to explore that deep sea. Now, at first we tried to fish for these creatures using big nets. But the difference in pressure between the deep sea and our own environment caused a lot of the species that were caught to simply explode when they were surfaced. So this meant that the only way to really explore the deep sea would be to go down there. In 1920, the ornithologist William Beebe teamed up with an engineer called Otis Barton. And together they designed the Bathysphere. It was basically just a giant metal ball. No doors, no engines, just 2 oxygen tanks and a small bench that was just big enough for the 2 of them. This is what it looked like, by the way. So the 2 men had to crawl through that little window. Then the window was bolted airtight, and the Bathysphere was winched from the deck with a steel cable and lowered into the deep sea, all the way down. With the Bathysphere, Otis and William went 6 times deeper than anyone ever did before them. The deepest they ever went was a little over 900 meters. Now, of course, at those depths, there's no longer sunlight penetrating through the water surface. So that's why they brought torchlight to stare into the darkness. And that's how they sat there. The 2 men on their little bench with their torchlight and a wiper to clean the window every now and then. Just staring in the black and looking for new creatures to discover. They didn't have a camera in their little submarine. It wouldn't have worked there anyway. Instead, they had a telephone cable going all the way up back to the ship. And they rambled on and on and on and on and on about everything they saw down there. And on deck, there was Els Bostelman. She was an artist who drew out everything the 2 men described. And when Otis and William came back up after a successful dive, they went straight to the drawing board to see if the images Els made matched with what they had seen below. And if these images were correct, they were sent to local newspapers or magazines like National Geographic's for publication. Now, at first, people looked at these pictures in disbelief, thinking that William and Otis were lying, or at least delirious, because of the depths that they were in. But the more our technology gave us the opportunity to further explore this deep sea, the more their findings were confirmed. And after a while, we were able to create better, more autonomous submarines that could go to even greater depths. And the Bathysphere found its final resting place in the New York Aquarium, where you can still visit it today. As a designer, I have great respect for the value of creativity, both in your professional career as well as a tool for personal development. And creativity is often regarded as some sort of talent, right? As a gift, as something that some people are blessed with, while others are not. But that's not how creativity works. Creativity is a choice. It's a choice of curiosity over fear, as Elizabeth Gilbert defines it beautifully. And for creativity, you need two things. You need wonderment, and you need the tools to do something with that wonderment. Now, wonderment is about looking at the world and constantly discovering new things in it, right? Questioning how stuff works. Who made this? What could I do with it? Between parents, there's this tacit understanding that it's the children who are raising their parents, not the other way around. And the reason for that is wonderment. Children don't have to actively force themselves to question things. It's natural. To them, it's all new. And we often mistake our kids' wonderment for creativity. But creativity is a choice to act. Wonderment is the attitude and the mindset with which you take in the world around you. And wonderment is contagious. Wonderment can be nourished. It can be taught. But to do this, you need authenticity. It's very hard to make someone curious about something if you consider it to be something that is dull or boring. Wonderment needs authenticity. You have to be curious yourself. The curiosity has to come from you. So that's why I don't read stories to my kids. I tell them stories. I want them to hear these stories in my own words, with my own accentuations, in my own voice. So I go out and I look up stories, and then I go look for pictures or ways to get them involved, and then I tell the story. For example, I told that story of the Bathysphere to my 4.5-year-old about 6 months ago. And when I was making this presentation and looking for a good picture, he came running to my screen and said, "Look, Dad, it's the Bathysphere." And then he retold the entire story in his own words. And that's what wonderment will do. It's contagious. And then the question is, how can we use that viral effect of curiosity and wonderment when we are raising and educating our children? Schools are great at teaching you content, at teaching you the tools to be creative with. But that creativity won't spark without wonderment. Right? You learn about the Theorem of Pythagoras. The square of the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the squares of the other two sides. But you will rarely learn that Pythagoras was actually trying to figure out the height of the pyramids of Cheops. They'll teach you about material density and how to calculate it using Archimedes' law. But they won't tell you that Archimedes was trying to figure out if the crown of the king was made purely out of gold. You'll learn about some of the creatures that are living in the deep sea, but they will rarely tell you the story of the two madmen that crawled into a giant metal ball and were winched down 900 meters below the sea surface to go looking for these creatures. If we want our kids to be more creative, we have to start not with more content, but with context. We have to keep them curious, keep them questioning, keep them wonder. Thank you.